Marden and the land of the poor. In a difficult period where tragedy and injustice abounded, lived a strong young man with a big heart named Marden. This young man grew up in a poor family and lived in a country called the land of the poor. He traded many professions, and he did not continue in his profession because he did not agree to cheat and cheaters, theft and thieves. And one day, he was going to work on agricultural land which extended over long distances which he owned Gamak ibn Shafran. Each year, Gamak ibn Shafran exploited the conditions of the peasants who had lands. He paid them in advance, and when he did not recover the advances, he pursued them and took the land. He smiled and didn't care about the end of the earth. He didn't care about death and thought he would have eternity and stay in this world. Marden began to work in the land of Gamak ibn Shafran. He used to see many types of worker torture, and he would not be immune to it either. Anyone who did not tolerate the humiliation would be killed or imprisoned. Marden was covered with patience, and the light of smiles still covered his face. He exhorted his friends to be patient and to sow in their hearts the hopes and sparks of dreams. The day he was on the ground, guards of Gamak ibn Shafran came and began to beat them, but this time his dear friend Marden died, surrounded by the severity of the blows. Marden cried out to the guards, and they wanted to mistreat him, so their end was fast, and death surrounded them on all sides. He killed them all, transported his friend and went to his house to celebrate the funeral. Gamak ibn Shafran heard what was going on and was almost going crazy and ordered the arrest of Marden. Marden finished the funeral and buried his friend, and suddenly, when he came back from the cemetery, he met several guards carrying swords. They surrounded him to stop him. He began to remove the necks and jump the jump of the lion on its prey. They were dead, their bodies near the cemetery, cut into pieces. Marden went to his house and took everything he needed to leave his country, fleeing the oppression of Gamak ibn Shafran. On the way to his departure, he began to remember what was happening, and although he defended himself, he is now in the midst of the torments of consciousness because he is courageous and kind, and he does not not kill at all. It was these fates that made him a prisoner of his poverty and his needs that made him hostage to self-defense and murder. He went from one place to another where the world was filled with many poor, some rich, a small fragmentation of the luxuriant, very little pity and family kinship, a lot of social hypocrisy and volcanoes of injustice that plunged people into darkness. Most people asked for help from delusions, and there is no savior other than God, the most merciful. Marden was reaching a wild forest where the authorized natural conflict was, but he appeared to people in a brutal way, so he went inside and suddenly he heard voices coming from a hut. Then he rushed there. Lo, and set fire to a wood, and went in search of the source of these sounds inside the hut, and in one of its sides discovered a prison in which men and women were thirsty and hungry, and found a key in front of the prison bars that nobody could reach, and opened the door for them, and after that he went hunting with their chiefs after giving him water, and both returned with water and abundant hunting, and saved everyone from thirst and hunger. And their chief started to tell him their stories, and he said, "I am the chief of the country of Mahdan. We thank God for the blessing, and we work hard to obtain our daily food. My son wanted he married the daughter of the Gamak ibn Shafran because he loved her so much, but this madman asked him to control the domination of the country and to become the chief and to kill me so that he could marry his daughter. My son well-loved came back, and he told me the story, and his heart broke with worry and sorrow and wept as he thought of the end of his great love. So I was going to Gamak ibn Shafran, and I said to him, 'Why did you do this?' So he ordered his guards to arrest me, and he and his soldiers attacked our country and had killed many and imprisoned others in this cave. And Gamik ibn Shafran put this key in front of the bars in order to burn our hearts, because salvation is before our eyes and we could not reach it. He left the lands of Mahdan and walked in the land of God, without knowing where and when to settle. Many questions had always occurred to him. Why does this injustice cover this earth? Who is responsible for this? Why don't the poor unite with the rich? Why this metal and this paper which is called money became a god? Why did we shed blood for the wealth of this mortal world? What is the solution? And when will this conflict end? He stopped walking and sat on a rock looking at the nature, and suddenly he noticed from a distance a powerful army shaking the ground, and heard the screams of the women, and the crying and the howling. He began to approach as he hid behind each rock, and he heard two soldiers talking. The first said, "Today will be a great celebration for our victory over the army of Mehdi ibn Hakan, and we will have lived happily with the women we captivated. These days will be the happiest days of our lives, and Gamik ibn Shafran will provide us with a lot of money." The other answered him, "Will he give us anything of his wealth? His money was collected from looting, theft, fraud and all that is prohibited." Marden knew that the vile Gamik ibn Shafran, who spread terror everywhere and took money and honor from others aggressively. He followed the path from where they came and arrived at the entrance of a city, and he found a man drowned in his blood. So they asked him what had happened, and he replied, "I am a soldier of Mehdi ibn Hakan. He is the king of our country, and he has a good heart and a beautiful character." The traitors sold him to Gamik ibn Shafran after the latter was among his servants. He cleaned his stable and kissed her hands, but he coveted his daughter. When he found his dream out of reach, he stole a lot of gold from the palace after killing 2 guards and a servant and fled, and with this wealth he managed to start a life full of endless injustice. He eventually returned to imprison Mehdi ibn Hakan and captivate his daughter, and he was not satisfied with that, but he killed many people and captivated the women of the country. Marden left the city and went to a mountain where many had settled. From the poor of all countries, Gamik ibn Shafran stormed them and abused many of its inhabitants, so he met them and all agreed to eliminate this tyrant. An army had to be assembled, and they went to the land of Mahdan, and it was the son of its chief who ruled the country because his father was imprisoned by Gamik ibn Shafran for the second time. They were invited and Marden was led to organize an army to fight against this tyrant. Marden's army traveled a long way to reach his homeland, and before his arrival Gamik ibn Shafran learned this, so he assembled a large army whose number covers the eye of the sun. A fierce war began between them, where heads were harvested and blood was shed. That day was accursed for Gamik ibn Shafran because the war ended in favor of Marden. He established a just judgment on the tyrant Gamik ibn Shafran. Marden saved the daughter of King Mehdi ibn Hakan and gave back to the poor their lands which were taken from them, and organized a marriage of which people would speak everywhere. And his heart will remain with the poor, and he would not rest if he saw in his homeland a hungry or thirsty person until he gives him water and feeds him until thirst and hunger abandons him and he feels peace.